Welcome to A Sense of Hope podcast by One Life. I am your host, Helen Duyvestyn, a registered nurse and life coach. Through insightful conversations and uplifting stories, we will aim to break boundaries and instill a sense of hope in every listener. As a reminder, this information is not to be taken as medical advice. Please consult your healthcare practitioner before making any changes to your healthcare regime. Let's get started. Welcome to A Sense of Hope podcast with One Life. I'm your host, Helen Duyvestyn, and today we are speaking to Donna Stichbury. Donna is originally from the United Kingdom and came to New Zealand some 23 years ago. In the UK, she had trained as a Learning Disabilities nurse. After her own children were born, she retrained to be an early childhood teacher before travelling the world to learn about the PICLA method, which we will soon learn about. And this has meant spending quite a lot of time in Budapest. Donna is the founder of Peaceful Beginnings. Peaceful Beginnings supports adults to walk alongside their children to find their inner wisdom. Her work is twofold. It's about supporting children to be the very best version of their authentic selves. And this goes hand in hand with supporting the adults without guilt or shame to realise the parts they had missing in their own journey as a child, recognising that you can't give what you haven't had. Sometimes these missing parts are what creates the challenges in our journey with our own children. Donna believes that you can break the generational chains of trauma running through so many of us. Donna now creates the courses she wished she had as a new mum or teacher, bringing her own unique understanding of the world and how children develop to support those who want to work with her. Welcome, Donna.
Thank you. Good to be here.
I immediately recognise when I'm reading that introduction about the parts of myself that were missing when I had my child due to what went on in my life. So I'm reading that going, oh, I can so relate to this. And I just think it's wonderful that you have recognised this and that you're now promoting, your whole business is about this gap that we may have as adults in bringing up our own children. So I'm super excited to talk to you and how you've developed this method and why you've developed this method over the years.
This came from my own journey. So everything I've created is because I needed it as I was a mum or as I was a teacher. And it slowly pieced itself together. I feel like over the last 7 or 8 years, I have been building this jigsaw puzzle of all the missing pieces. And different people have literally helped me along the way. So I can't say this is my own stuff. It's just my own unique way of viewing the world and piecing together different forms of the research, the science stuff, but also the observations of what I'm seeing from the parents and from the children and from the teachers. This is my own unique view of the world of how I've seen it.
So how and where did it all start? Like when did you sort of think, hang on, there's something missing in what we're doing? How did this start for you?
I can't say the exact time, but what I can, there was a very profound moment that I had. It was probably about 8 years ago. I was standing on my front steps and I was experiencing anger. So what I was working as a teacher and I was absolutely fine working as a teacher, but I was coming home and I could just feel this dysregulation and I could feel this anger. And I just did not like this feeling. So this to me is the profound moment for me. And I remember just standing on my front steps and I just said, I literally said, the universe, please help me to get a hold of this anger. And from there, I've been on this most remarkable journey. I met the late Penny Brownlee and She did a course called Dance with Me in the Heart, which is based on the Pikler approach from Budapest, and so she had her own way of seeing the world. And I went on that 8-day retreat, and I probably threw out probably 98% of my degree. And I was a top student. I ended up my degree the top student for that year. And after spending 8 days with Penny, I literally went, whoa, we've got the wrong idea of how we need to be with children. So that was the start of it. And then from there, I worked with Penny. So I did all the courses that Penny had to offer before I went off and started to meet the Pikler guides myself. And so now I'm on, I think, 8 years of their courses. I've got another 2 years to go before I can call myself a Pikler pedagogue. And it's the most respectful way of being with children. But to understand the deep understanding of what they do, I've had to go off and I've had to learn about brain science. I've had to go off and learn about the nervous system. I've had to go off and learn about self-regulation. I've gone off and learned about attachment. And just this last year, I've gone off to learn about trauma. So just to piece it all together, because I needed to be able to have the language and I suppose the research science language to be able to go, hey, this stuff's actually important. And it's not just woohoo stuff. This is actually what children actually need. And then as I've just been watching the relationships of the adults, I suddenly started to see, okay, these moments where we're in conflict, without guilt or shame, these are moments where we're struggling ourselves. And then this is where Donna Berry from Interplay last year just put that puzzle piece for me, because she was the one that said that we can't give what we haven't had. And I suddenly went, okay, I've got it. It might be about, the brain develops from the bottom up, your nervous system, your attachment. And I was watching all of those things as individuals, but it was through working with Donna last year that I suddenly started looking at them from a modern attachment view, and suddenly it all made sense. When you bring this all together, you can go, okay, our journey that we've had now makes sense when we're actually being with our own children, because what we think of as pushing the buttons as triggers are just really beautiful guides of where those missing bits are. And so we just, and again, this is where the self-reg theory comes in, where we reframe it. And it's more, rather than seeing this as something bad, this is actually something the child's gifting us. And so it just beautifully all weaves in together. So, but it's come from many, many people.
So by self-reg, you mean self-regulation?
Self-regulation. So it's really that space where we're not in survival. And so many of us, I feel, we actually live our lives in stress. And this is another person that I've learned from. So Alison Davis in Australia, an autistic lady who's been able to verbalize what it means to struggle with your regulation. And so what I love about that is how do we create these windows and increase this ability to not go into our survival response. And that takes getting to know who we are, getting to know our attachment style, getting to know what triggers us, and learning to feel comfortable with those uncomfortable moments. And I think that's the beauty of it, is when we can actually sit in those uncomfortable in co-regulation with someone else, I feel magic happens. We can get ourselves into a new way of being, where we can actually work with things that used to create pain for us or were uncomfortable for us. But we do that in relationship with other people. We do that with people that are already regulated. And this is what I try and really advocate to parents and teachers. It's actually okay. It's okay about these missing bits. And it's actually okay as an adult that we have someone that will hold us while we're learning to do something we haven't done before. Exactly how we gift that for the child, we can also gift that for ourselves.
Mm. Oh
And we
God, I love that. Yeah. And I've mentioned this to you before when we were sort of having a pre-interview, but a lot of what you speak about really reminds me of training in mindfulness or meditation, or maybe the Buddhist philosophy of really getting to know yourself. So one of the things I think about of meditation is that it's a way of getting to know yourself. You begin to know your triggers, you begin to understand what sets you off, what presses your buttons, and then you peel back the layers of the onion. And I think you use this as well, that you get down to what's this really about. And I think that's so powerful. And if you can remove that emotion a little bit out of it and become curious about, oh, someone said something and I've just really lost my shit. What does that mean for me? Where does this come from and how do I unpack this? So I'm assuming that for many people, this might be quite a completely new way of dealing with things.
Well, it's absolutely a new way. And I laugh because when people first meet me, they think I'm a little bit wishy-washy, and it's more, I'm just like, stay with it, because this sounds really simple what I'm teaching you, but it's so powerful. And for me, just to have that freedom to relax into yourself. And there was a word you said, curious. That is such a huge word, huge word, not only for ourselves, but for when we're with the children. It's more the amount of time we go into conflict. And if we could just be curious, I know when I'm working with children, a lot of time rather than stop, no, don't, I'm like, what's your plan? And the children normally have a plan. Now it might be a 5 point plan, and point two and point four is like, oh, that's shocking. But point one, three, and five are really good. And so again, if we want children to be their authentic selves, then actually being curious and actually seeing what they already have and actually seeing that they've already got this competence is stuff that maybe we didn't have in our own childhood, that then if we didn't have it, it's really hard for us to allow the children to have it. And I think the huge thing is that trust. Do we trust the children? Because sometimes that's really difficult because we don't actually trust ourselves. So to
Mm,
actually trust someone smaller than us is huge. But when you
mm,
see how amazing children are, when you see how capable they are just through biology, it blows your minds. And so many of us are missing these early steps of what's
mm,
actually happening, how the children are naturally unfolding, because we're so focused on the end result rather than actually seeing that the journey is that the development of authenticity. There's
mm,
parts that we're just missing. We're so missing them, and I wish I could support mums to see what an amazing journey this is that they could have with their child, and that everyone grows together.
mm,
We think that our job is to teach the children, but it's not. The children are just as much teaching us. And yeah, I wish I had come in and learnt what I have learnt when my own children were younger, because I've done it as a teacher with other people's children. And I've seen this amazing joy, not only in the child, but also in myself from experiencing it. And I wish that people could actually see this. Just
mm.
it's there, but it's hidden in plain sight.
Yeah. When you were talking, I'm curious because I think many of us were brought up in a very authoritarian household. And I was very lucky actually. My mother was taught she was a Montessori school teacher, a Montessori kindy teacher. So came from a different learning style, but still a very sort of Dutch authoritarian household. And so I'm curious as about how much that impacts how we as adults are. I'm talking about my generation. So the next, we're probably onto the second, third generations now, children. How did that, or how has that, do you think, impacted how we now parent or parented our children? Maybe you're in a similar generation to me.
So I'm very much in a similar generation to you, and I think this is when you start understanding about attachment theory and the nervous system. So when I hear you talk and when I hear, so again, the greats got this. So Maria Montessori, Emmy Pickler, they all created their theories before we had the brain imaging to back it up. But they knew how children were naturally developing. And so when I hear you talk, I'm hearing attachment theory and I'm hearing the nervous system. And really there's two parts. So so rather than laissez-faire, where there's no rules or where there's too many strict rules, there's a space in the middle, which is authoritative parenting, or I like to call it conscious parenting. But this is actually where we're looking at following the child. So we're looking at developing this authenticity. But there's also another important part, which is actually we are the senior dance partners, and that our role is to guide the children and to support them with taking charge. So again, absolutely we can have our authenticity, but we have to actually be able to be in society with others. So that actually needs some negotiation. And that comes from a regulated adult. So this is where the attachment and the nervous system actually work together, because you need a regulated adult that can actually put in really calm boundaries, because the children feel safe when they actually know where it stops. But so often, because of our own attachment style, we can either be really heavy-handed. So again, it's quite funny. I love working with dads. I absolutely adore working with dads. But I have to actually watch them, because sometimes they're like, we have to actually put, put the line in the sand, and we've got to do that really firm. I'm like, actually, if you watch me place a limit in, you won't even know that I've put the limit in. It's very quiet, it's very calm, it's very peaceful, but it's also very strong. And also what people actually forget is when we actually put the limit in, the child is absolutely allowed to actually feel all of their emotions. And sometimes from the limit, they can feel frustrated or feel angry. And that's also our role too. Our role is to support them to actually feel safe in that emotion. But because of our own attachment styles, there's parts of this that we maybe will put us into our own survival mode. So again, I've often watched parents maybe not put the limit in when it needed to be put in because they were scared of how big the emotion was going to be, or the limit goes in way too hard, and then they totally forget about supporting the child. All of this is actually really important when we're looking at attachment theory. When we're looking at the nervous system, we actually want, if we want children to be resilient, we want them to feel really safe in all the emotions. And that also means that the emotions, they need to know that they can stop. So often, because of our own survival, our own limits, we try and distract children. And so children don't actually know. And I just heard this, I heard this last week, that we're becoming a society where we're putting screens in front of children rather than allowing them to feel emotions. But for us to allow them to feel those emotions, for the child to feel that there's actually someone with them, we need to be regulated ourselves. We don't need to be dissociated. We need to actually stay present. So again, this is going back to what you were saying about that mindfulness. So I really talk about it's about conscious parenting. I need to be there. I need to be there regulated with the child, because my role is for them to feel safe with the limits and also with the emotions that come with them. And then when we come to the limits as well, so again, part of actually this style that I work with, and it's really, really hard, again, challenging when we haven't had it, when we've been brought up in either laissez-faire or authoritarian, is that we need to actually be able to have the confidence to negotiate with children. So again, I talk when I'm with parents, I talk about red rules and pink rules. So my red rules are about safety. And so this ties into Montessori. So Montessori says, similar to what we say in Pickler, is that it's freedom within limits. So it's actually where we sit down with mum and dad. Mum and dad usually have a different attachment style. So one might be anxious, one might be avoidant, but we come down and we come together to actually agree what we're going to do. We're going to have that consistency. And so those safety ones, it's more, it doesn't matter who is there, we support through that because they're about safety. And I usually have a little phrase when I'm working with children that we don't hurt people's bodies or their hearts. And I've had so many mums that have come to me who've been dysregulated, and their 3-year-old, when mum has actually lost the plot, and their 3-year-old has said, "Mummy, that's hurting my heart." And the mum to stop in their tracks to go, "Whoa, I'm actually being supported by my 3-year-old." And I've had it time and time again where the parents have come back to me and gone, "Oh my goodness, Donna, that was the hugest lesson I have ever had when I'm actually being told that I'm being dysregulated by my 3-year-old."
My goodness. What age do you start working with either the children, I mean, or the parents, I suppose? What age do you get in there? I mean, I would love to have this pre-children, but
So again, the ideal thing would be pre. I tend to come in because of all the things that I'm working with from more of a Pickler approach. So I'm working with freedom of movement, I'm working with freedom of play, I'm working with respectful caregiving. But a child before the age of 3 months is probably still very much in arms. And so when I'm holding a class, a lot of the time if the mums come before, they're literally going, their child's not doing that. And I'm going, because it's absolutely perfect. This is the 4th trimester. This is a time for both of you to actually rest. This is the 4th trimester out of the womb. So I tend to start my classes at 3 months. But again, going back to what Donna Berry's actually saying, and her work has been, I'm just blown away with what I've learned from her the last year. But she's actually saying that the child is feeling everything that the mum is going through from 10 days of conception.
wow.
And that a lot of what we're actually seeing nowadays could be construed as brainstem trauma. So it's just more, when you look at brainstem trauma, when you actually look at neurodivergency, they can look actually very similar. And she's saying we're too scared. We're too scared to actually go where the heart of this is. We're too scared to actually go and actually look at the trauma where it's actually starting. Now, this is not where I'm focusing at the moment. Where I'm focusing, because I believe in we can change. The brain is adaptable. So I start to work with mums and their babies around about 3 months. And what I'm trying to show them is this attunement, this responsiveness, because this is actually what the brain needs. This is what the nervous system needs. And if we're looking at how the sympathetic and the parasympathetic actually work, then we actually need, from the very beginning, we need that responsiveness in the caregiving. And unfortunately, this is something as a society we've created falsehoods of how we should be as parents, that actually the parent is an incredibly important person for the child, because we are developing the brain, we are developing the nervous system, we are developing attachment. And so many of us as 30, 40, 50-year-olds are having to go back and actually undo all the stuff that has happened to us as children. If we could only get there at the start, I would love what I do to be funded by the government, because this is going to save so much money later on down the track.
Yeah, I just thinking about the impact of early childhood trauma. So we know about the ACE, the ACE
Yep.
studies, the adverse childhood experiences,
Yep.
and the impact that that has, for me, focusing on mental health. So we know that you are significantly more likely to experience a mental illness, you're more likely to end in prison. From a physical health state, you are more likely to be obese. I mean, the early childhood trauma impact on a human being is so significant. And we have to understand that some of the trauma that we experience isn't what we would consider traumatic. So it's not that the child's been terribly physically or sexually abused or anything like that, but they just have had experiences in their life that have caused them to think or have a belief, whether it's about them or the world at large, which they then carry on into adulthood. And that creates, a completely different future for them. So I'm really fascinated about, and I agree that if we could get on top of the early childhood trauma, we would save thousands in future medical care costs.
So going back to where did this all start? So I used to facilitate Penny's parent-infant classes, and I watched these amazing mums. And then we went into what I call my play space, which is actually with the toddlers. And I watched things change. And there was an energy in the room at that time. So this is going back probably 6 or 7 years, and I didn't understand. But I could see things, and I was like, what on earth is going on? And I was watching a lot of parents were starting to lose faith in this peaceful way of actually being with children. And I was starting to watch them in their desperation go off and look for things that were a lot more authoritarian. And I was like, okay, I'm missing something here. I'm missing a huge chunk of, because I'm not able to support them through this. And I'm like, I still very much believe in relationships and the power of relationship. So I went off and I researched and I found circular security. And suddenly I was like, okay, what I'm seeing, it's about attachment. So I was actually watching mums in the space responding more from an anxious perspective or an avoidant perspective, but I was seeing this all happen in front of my eyes. And I was blown away with how certain things that the children were doing were creating triggers within the adults. And then because then their nervous system was dysregulated, they would then their attachment styles were starting to be exaggerated. And I was like, oh my goodness. And so this is my whole thing. It's you can't look at brain development or the nervous system or attachment separately. You have to look at this all together. And for each child, they will have a different parent that will be parenting them, because they will be bringing their own temperament, which will then it will either have one that soothes the parent's nervous system, or that sandpiper child, which is really sending that parent into dysregulation. And they're not, so the child isn't doing anything, but just through who they are, and just because of how the parent's nervous system is and how they were parented and their attachment style, suddenly we've now got this relationship that just needs some co-regulation. It just needs someone to support them through those moments of uncomfortableness. And so again, and I've only done one series of this, but this is where I last year at Sharda, I changed my play space and I made the play space based on circular security and interplay. So it was actually where I had that role as the co-regulator. And so the parents held the safe haven and the secure base for the children. But then the children came out and played in the space with me. So again, I believe in freedom of play. So I don't dictate the play, but what I do is I recognize the urges and the schemas of the children. And so then I hold the space while the children play. And then through that, the children will come into contact with each other, and then suddenly we start to see the social competence, and they are just learning. And so there are going to be conflicts that go on, but what happens is the parents get to see me working. They get to see the words that I use. So one of the things that I really, really, truly believe in is no bullies or victims. I think we actually create them because of our attachment styles and the way that we go into situations. So again, this is another, I do find it's a very mindfulness way that I work with children, is that I don't think about what happened last week. I'm not thinking about what's going to happen in a week's time. In this moment, I'm seeing two children, and so I see them as free and equal human beings. And so I go in there that I'm going to give both children something to learn. And that might be the child that we might label as the victim. I might be gifting them, if you don't like this, you can move away. Or it might be the child that's perceived or labeled as the bully, and they're not. They're children learning. I might be gifting them. Can you see that Johnny's actually crying? When you touched him with your hands, that really hurt him. I'm trying to get them to actually see each other. But because of our own feelings of unsafety, a lot of the time we rush in there, and we are, before even if anything's even happened, we've already assigned roles to these children. And so for me, when I'm working with parents, when I'm working with teachers, I'm like, no, in this moment, we have two children in front of us, and we need to actually work on our own regulation first so that we can hold the space for both of these children. So this is how powerful this work is and how much I love it.
I can also see how challenging it is for the adult, that because they probably just want to, how do I discipline my child? You know, I want my child to do this and they don't, and they're not listening to me. So I can imagine that to actually sort of have a mirror held up in front of them would be hugely confronting. And have you ever had someone that says, actually, Donna, bugger off? You know?
So I feel, so again, when people first come to my parent infant classes, to start, so again, I work at a very, very low level to start off with, and sometimes it's not what people are expecting. So I've had before where people are expecting they're coming to an all singing, all dancing library session. That's not what I do. So what I do in my parent infant classes is, first of all, we've got the topic of the week. And it might be that we're talking about relationships. We might be talking about how children naturally move. I might be talking about self-regulation. There'll be a topic, but I also then back up that topic. And this is something that I learned from Pickler and from Penny Brownlee, is I use something called experientials. So I will do something that will bring up a body memory for the adults in the room. So again, it could be that I'll do, there's one I do on when I'm working with care moments. So care moments is just the things that we do every day. So it's the changing of the nappies, it's the feeding, it's the washing, it's the dressing. But we use these as connection moments, knowing how important connection moments are for attachment, for regulation. So we use these moments. So there's one of my experientials where I've got my demonstration baby who's called Simon, and with Simon I will do a nappy change, and I will do it very distracted. I will do it very harshly. I'll be on the phone. I'll treat him like an object. And then
this isn't a real child. Let's just put this clear.
This is not
just make this very clear. This is not a real child. Yeah.
This is Simon. He is my demonstration, but it is actually quite interesting because he is child size, and I whenever I'm with him, I talk to him as if he's a real baby. So I've confused many a parents at the start of class when I'm actually with my baby doll. And this is why people think that when they first meet me, because I'm doing all this, they're like, you've got a doll and you're treating this doll like a real baby. And I'm like, yes, because when Simon comes out with me, I want you to watch me all the time with how I am with him. And so the second one I actually do is it's very respectful. I'm leaving the pauses. So this is that whole thing when we're actually looking at reciprocal relationships. To start off with, we need to actually just create those pauses. So it's more, yes, a baby might not be able to give consent straight away, but the more we do things, the more that we're actually watching for how their face is, the more we actually allow them to participate. So it starts really small, and it feels quite uncomfortable sometimes when you're working with a 3-month-old baby and you're asking them if you can pick them up. But every child that I've worked with, when I really spend time with them, some child will crinkle their eyes up in acceptance. Some child will bring up their hands. Some children will kick their legs. I'm watching for any tiny movement I can see from the child that they're saying, yes, it's okay, Donna. And I feel it's the chicken and the egg. The more I respond to what I'm seeing, the more they will actually do it, and the more we actually get in harmony with each other. So with that, when the mums actually get to see this, there's stuff that's coming up in their bodies. And I always do the more conscious 1 second so that I can make sure that their bodies are relaxed, that we can actually talk about things. But there will be words that will come up. There will be feelings in their bodies when they experience these experientials. And my role is to hold them and talk them through, because everything I do has to be with safety, has to be with trust. So again, as each week goes, I'll do something maybe a little bit more, a little bit bigger, because the parents have to trust me. They have to feel safe with me. And so going back to your question, yes, some parents have literally gone, nah, not going to happen. So, and if they go, that's actually okay, because everything that I do, so one of the huge things that I learnt in Budapest was about the invitation. And so it's actually okay for people, this is their relationship with their child. And if they want to do something different, absolutely. All I'm doing is giving you an invitation of a different way. And whether you take up that invitation, whether you take up, 2% of it, whether you take up all of it, that's actually between you and your child and those around you. It's nothing to do with me, because this is your relationship and your nervous system has to feel safe in that relationship. So then there's a last thing that I do in the classes, which I call silent observation. And so this is actually where, because so often we don't watch the babies, and this is the one where the parents look at me like, oh my goodness, she's gone mad, because I ask them to watch the babies. But to start off with, I will do 2 minutes, and I'm watching the room the whole time to make sure I've got everyone. And I stop it as soon as I can feel the first discomfort, because what I'm actually trying to get them to do is I'm trying to get them to really, really see their child. And I had one mum on my last series that came to me and she's like, I've never done this before, Donna. She said, I've never sat in silence and the chatter that was going through my brain. But what happens is by the time I get to the end of the series, I'm probably now up to between 20 and 40 minutes of an hour and a half class. And the mums are begging for me not to stop this, because they get to see the wonder and the joy of what their babies are actually doing. And it's actually incredible when you see. So it's not just a case of our movement. It's not what we've been told. It's not just about lying on their backs, on their tummies, crawling, sitting, walking. The journey to walking is this most exquisite journey. And if you allow yourself to actually watch it, you'll see that your child is playing with balance, with center of gravity, with surface area, and they are putting themselves into places all the time. And they are doing this all the way to walking if we allow them to do this. And it is incredible. And all the time as well, because we've given them this freedom, they're also able to choose what they want to play with, whether they actually want to play with an object and the manipulation, or whether they actually want to work on their body. And it's stunning to actually watch this. And so once the parents, I guide them where to look, and once they see it, they're like, oh my goodness. And my classes, they're not real life. But what I'm able to give the parents is when they're in the kitchen, when they're going about, they're able to catch moments of my classes. They're able to catch moments, and they can actually see, and they can also then feel this safety that they don't have to be entertaining their children all the time. And this is a huge one for parents, because we think that we have to be teaching and entertaining, and we don't. And this really helps parents to find their regulation when they can see that their children are actually capable already. So it's a very, very different way of being with children.
Yeah, there's two things that come up when I heard you speak about that. One is that how sad it is that we don't even just sit. I mean, we don't sit with ourselves, let me put it that way, if we don't have children, but we don't just sit and observe our children and just be with them without being distracted, because I think 90% of us would grab our phones or read a book or do something. We'd distract ourselves. We wouldn't just sit and watch our child, just like we don't sit and watch ourselves. The other thing's gone out of my mind that I was thinking about with that.
So when you're saying that, Helen, it's more there's something. So again, when I'm working backwards with the adults, I work with something called the Thayer Matrix from Stuart Shanker's Self-Reg. And it's actually where we go through different levels of arousal. So between energy and tension. But when I watch babies and when we allow them to be, children naturally do this. Children naturally go through from busyness to rest without anyone having to teach them. But what happens is with our own busyness, we actually stop this in children, and we stop them, and we suddenly these children start to lose connection of what their body's actually telling them, because we've got an adult that is actually telling them that it's something different. And that's quite a hard concept for people to get their heads around. But when I see the joy in a child just stopping and pausing, and they'll stop playing. They'll just be watching the other children in the class. And that's absolutely perfectly okay, because they know that their body just needs to rest for a moment. And that's
Amazing.
again the difference in Budapest. So when I've gone to watch their rooms, they have day beds. And so they actively support children to take moments of rest, because they understand how important that being in a regulated body is. And so they do that. It's mind-blowing to actually watch. I've been for the last 2 years to actually watch their rooms, so different to ours in New Zealand, and so beautiful. It's more, the children don't, I'm there, I'll be there for an hour, and the children don't even pay attention to me, because they're so engrossed in their play, and they're so in relationship with their caregivers. It blows my mind every time I go there. Just it's like watching a movie in front of your eyes, and watching these children that know that their nervous system is actually really important. And these are up to 4-year-olds that I'm watching. So in Budapest, they come between 1 and 4. And they know this. By the time they're 4, they know how to find their balance again.
How does this compare to our play centres, kindy, dare I say it, schooling? Because I think our schooling system could do with a ginormous overhaul. But so how would this compare to, say, New Zealand's play centres and kindies? Let's start with that.
So I feel it's a shame that play centre. So again, I'm probably as close to play centre as anything. So if a parent left my classes, I would be advocating for them to still be there with their child at play centre. This is something that I've watched. It's a falsehood. It's an illusion that the best place for a child is with someone else. And this is going into big society stuff, because we've now got to a point where we need 2 incomes to pay for our houses, to do all this stuff. But it reminds me of what Nathan Wallace. So Nathan Wallace is, if you haven't heard of Nathan Wallace, go and find him. For me, he was groundbreaking in that he was able to bring the neuroscience and bring it to parents. So he's been around on the scene now, probably 8 years. and he makes things fun to listen to when he's talking about complicated things. But he would say, if you're going to spend, say, 50 grand on your child's education, and he posed this question, where are you going to place it? And what he actually advocates for is not in your tertiary, not in your universities, but actually staying home with your child in the first 5 years of life. And that's where play centre comes in. So again, because parents need that connection, but we also need to know how to be together, because there's good play centres and there's not so good play centres, depending on the combination of the adults, because we want all the adults working together and we want them to be aware of their attachment styles and how their nervous systems are all working with each other. But if I was looking at that model, then it's a shame. I was around in the time when the 23 hours came in, and I also watched how the parents left in their droves from play centre to go to what was supposedly better with the early childhood centres. And I am an early childhood teacher myself, and I still would say that play centre is actually best, and your play groups and all this stuff where you can actually have that primary attachment with your special person. Because all we do as teachers is that we take on that role. And this is why teachers they need to understand about relationship teaching, because we are taking on that role when their parents can't be with their children. And so we actually need to be doing our very best. And teaching is different. So when we're in Budapest, we're very clearly told that being a parent is very different to being a teacher, because the parent already has that heart connection. And we're told very, very clearly that we are not to bounce a parent out of that heart connection into their head. We are to allow the parent to have that relationship with the child. But as a teacher, we need to be absolutely 100% on our game. We need to make sure that we're really understanding our own regulation, that we understand our attachment styles, that we're not damaging children. Because because again, if you think about it, early childhood centres, we've suddenly got more stress, we've got more variables. It's a more stressful environment that we need to manage. So yeah, this is a huge topic. And again, it's something, yes, I am an early childhood teacher, but I would advocate for other. If you can actually stay home with your child, if you can be in a community where you are supported, where your child is supported, where you feel that you can be authentic, that's actually where your child needs to grow up.
So I guess my next question was around, what obstacles do we need to remove to see a shift like this happen within our education or our schooling or our kindy system? What would be the main changes? You've already answered that to a point, that actually we should be, if at all possible, which I know is almost impossible, a parent at home with the child for the first few years, and then integrating that into some sort of play, but also that you've got these structures that support the adults' almost emotional development in bringing up a child, which, man, if I'd had that as a 21-year-old mother, I was 21 when I had my daughter, what a difference that might have made. She's fine. My daughter's wonderful. There's nothing wrong with her. But, our relationship, that had the stress I was under, would have been a completely different attitude and mindset. And I could have been so much kinder on myself, actually, as well as my daughter.
And I think what you're bringing up is a huge thing, because we need to actually look at both. So this is where it's not just about how the child unfolds, but for the parent, we need to be supporting the parent. So again, if we know that there's these gaps, and if we know that so many of us have been brought up in more authoritarian ways, where we're more likely to have the little T traumas. we don't even realize, I didn't even realize myself that I'm a child of trauma until, in my 40s, 50s, when I'm working everything back and actually understanding why I am the way that I am. So my anger was nothing to be ashamed of. I'd just never been shown how to have healthy anger. So, and it's more the anger was telling me that something wasn't right. So I had it all confused. And again, for a parent that suddenly, so a young parent it's not easy. So one of my huge things when I'm looking at my maintenance plan with my self-reg, one of my huge ones is sleep. Now, what happens when we've actually got young children? We tend to get sleep deprived. So if we tend to get sleep deprived, we also tend to get dysregulated, and we don't even realize that what's actually, what's coming out of our mouths, what we're actually doing is dysregulation. We're literally going, oh my goodness, I'm a bad parent. You're not. You're dysregulated. You haven't learned to have a relationship with your nervous system. That's all it is. But then we go into this guilt and shame, and everything just becomes this mishmash of a mess. And so for me, my passion is supporting the parents, supporting the adults to understand there's nothing wrong with them apart from this stuff was programmed when they were younger. And because of the way that we've learnt about neuroplasticity in co-regulation, we can get through this. This is not a full stop. This is just a comma. And all you need to do is find someone like me that can work in co-regulation with you while you're learning to feel comfortable with those uncomfortable, dysregulated feelings in your body. And that's all it is.
100%, I get that. I mean, it's something I tell my clients so often. Actually, there's nothing wrong with you. It's just that your experiences that you've had either as a child or as an early adult have conditioned you or, caused you to have these sensitivities or triggers or ways of behaving or ways of believing. And so, we carry these with us, like a little shoulder pack. And then when we have children, hello, guess who's going to press those buttons?
And also, this is the thing as well, because so mums, I was never like this before children. The reason that you weren't like this before children was because the way that you used to cope, the way that you worked with your nervous system, you can't do when you have children. So suddenly you're going, I used to go out for a run when I felt like it. I used to go swimming or whatever it was that was in your maintenance package. You've now got this little being that's totally reliant on you. And so suddenly what's happening is when you can't manage how you used to manage things, now we have to really do the work, because now we have to find appropriate ways of working with our nervous system, working with our attachment styles. And that's all it is. And we need to thank the children for this. They're not pushing our buttons. They're just showing us where there's parts we still need to look at. And that's, to me, that's what I want the message for parents to actually hear. It's more, you had your strategies, but you can't use those strategies anymore. You're a parent. You need to find different ones.
What a wonderful, that's a beautiful way of thinking about it, actually, that, there's nothing wrong, but this is a gift that you can now retrain. It's like a waking up, isn't it? It's like, oh, actually, I'm learning something about myself, and that would make, everything feel so much more graceful, I think. Maybe the word is that you could walk into this and go, okay, I notice.
That's the whole thing. We're growing together. So again, this is those illusions that we feel that it's only the child learning. And if we could just break down this illusion that it's not. When a child is born, so is a parent. And both of you are learning together, but we haven't quite got that message through yet. And so parents feel they're doing something wrong. And again, it's that we don't have the understanding. So again, if people understood how the brain literally is developing from the bottom up, so much of what we think is misbehavior in children is actually stress behavior. If we understand about the impulse control, all the executive function stuff, that actually we're not really even seen until about 4. But then at 4, we're comparing apples and oranges, because we know if a child has had trauma, if a child is neurodivergent, or even if they're a last-born boy, as Nathan Wallace would say, their brain is just building at a different rate. It has nothing to do with intelligence, and all to do with biology. And it would just relax everyone. But I find that for me, now working with teachers, I have to go, whoa, hang on. We can't all compare all 4-year-olds the same. And there's a reason why the European countries didn't start their formal learning until 7, because of the development of the brain. So again, just like I said, we don't want to create bullies and victims. Just think what's happening for a child that's still brain is actually forming. And then suddenly we've got them in school and we're telling them that they're not doing well in school. Then they're at the bottom of the ladder, or whatever it is for behavior, or whatever we're using in school. But they're not bad children. They're children that haven't had the executive functioning stuff come online. That's all it is. But what we're doing now is we're creating this this really cruddy self-image of who that child is. Those children need to be out more and playing and in nature. They don't need to be sitting in the classroom, sitting on the mat for hours on end.
100%. Yep. Yeah, that's our schooling system, isn't it? It's very much pigeonholing and standardizing, which doesn't necessarily work. So, Donna, where are you based? And if people want to work with you, how can they go about that?
Okay, so
I'm based... parents want to work with you.
So parents or teachers, it's more, and I go with where the need is. So I am happy. So when I do my parent infant classes, all I need is if you've got a space that I can put a mat and put some sheets over the top of it. I'm happy to travel around Auckland. I'm even happy to travel around the north end of the Waikato. For me, it's more about getting this message out. And so I've just made I'm on the move, really. I also do a lot of stuff online, but my love is the parent classes. My love is to show you what I can see, but also I can work with, if you're hearing me now and your child is 3, 4 or older, then I can work with you. And it's just about finding your starting place, because it will be different. And where you want to start. So some people want to start looking at attachment. Some people want to start looking at their nervous systems. Some people just want to start with the education of themselves, of to see things differently. But for me, I just want to work with people as long as they want to work with me. And I accompany people. I think that's really, people have tried to pigeonhole me as a consultant, and I don't want to be seen as a consultant, because a consultant is the all-knowing person over the top. And that's not who I am. I'm the person that walks beside you, because you're the one, you know your child best. And all I'm doing is I'm supporting you until you don't actually need those stabilizer wheels anymore, and you can actually go off on your own. So it's just a totally different way of viewing things.
Yeah. So you'll do classes, you do some one-on-one. So if people want to have a one-on-one session with you, and you can do online. You're doing some online classes too?
So I do some online classes. So I do circular security, which I'm a facilitator for circle security. I'm a facilitator for Stuart Shanker's self-reg. I'm a Donna Berry interplay facilitator, but then I also have my own unique courses where I bring my own view of the world together. They're the ones that I love doing the most, but sometimes you might want to start off with more of a formalized one and then come on to something else. Or you might, so again, I've got a private Facebook group where what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to meet the needs of everyone, and not all parents can afford stuff. So I do weekly lives, and they're free, but there's also a self-responsibility where you actually have to come when the live is, if you want it for free. Otherwise, I just sell them for $29. But for me, I'm trying to create something for everyone, recognizing that not everyone has the same financial ability. And it shouldn't, to work with me, shouldn't come down to finances. And what I would love is I would love to get picked up by other agencies so that parents don't have to pay for what I do. But at the moment, I am self-employed, so there is a cost to it.
Yeah, I hear you on that. Great. Okay, that's wonderful information. So people can just look up Peaceful Beginnings online, and they'll find you.
So look it up online, on Facebook, on Instagram, and just find me. And again, if you don't know where to start, just give me a call or email me. I would rather that you reach out and we can figure out where your starting place is. And it might just be just watching a small $29 video, which is actually your starting place. You don't need to come on my big courses straight away. It's everything in your own time when you're ready. All I do is I give you the invitation.
Perfect. That's beautiful. And that creates curiosity too in people, doesn't it? So that's a way that people can say, oh, I can be curious about this. I want to know more.
And also feel safe with me. It's more to really work, you have to actually relax into the safety that I'm not going, so is this part of your parenting journey? Is this part of your teaching journey? Only you know that, and that's okay. If I'm not part of that, that's fine. But if I am, then do whatever you need to do to trust me, and then that's where the magic happens.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Donna. That is absolutely beautiful. Great.
I love that.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for your time on the Sense of Hope podcast today.
No, and you're doing wonderful things, Helen. Absolutely wonderful things. So thank you.
Thank you. We'll put your website and everything actually below on the Spotify so people can have a look down below and find Donna's details there.
No, thank you.
Great. All right. Thank you so much, Donna. See you later.
Bye.
Bye-bye.